Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Matt the Family Guy, Kent the Cat Guy, Jacqueline from JP Mint, and Greg the Single Guy, bringing you episodes from around the world about the best kept secret in education. You got it, international teaching. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to another episode of International Teacher Podcast. I'm happy to be joined with Kent the Cat Guy. Hello, Kent.
Hi, JP Mint. Glad to be here.
And Greg is away this time, but we have a special guest coming all the way in from Calgary, Alberta. Her name is Arlayna Alcock, and we'll hear what she has to share with our listeners today. Good morning. Good morning to you, Arlayna.
Morning, yes, and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah,
Good morning.
I think Calgary and Mexico, where I am, we're on the same time zone. Is it 8 o'clock there?
It is 8 a.m.
There we go. 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning. That is dedication,
yeah, right
folks.
Early, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Arlayna, thanks for joining us. And I was wondering if you could just give us the elevator pitch about who you are a little bit, how you got into the business of education, what your current kind of role is. Would you just get kind of a little brief introduction of yourself?
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually was an international student myself back in Mexico City for 2 years. And I studied cultural anthropology, and I taught English in a bank for 2 years. And then I came back and I did an adult education diploma in teaching English as a second language and how adults learn. And so then I started working at a college with refugees and Canadian newcomers, we call them, not immigrants, but newcomers, just teaching English. And then it just started to be things like resume writing, and people had to change their careers. So I started working with career transitions with international professionals, and then I ended up doing career counseling classes, and I became a certified career coach, and I have a master's degree in workplace learning for adults in education as well. So that start off in Mexico City was my kickstart into the rest of my career, actually, and so I'm still doing it.
So when you say Mexico City, this doesn't sound like high school then. It sounds like post secondary.
Yeah, I was doing my bachelor's degree, and I had these four options left. And my professor said if I could figure it out, I could do independent studies somewhere. And so I had a friend in Mexico City, and their family let me stay with them. So I was actually supervised by my professor in Canada at the University of Lethbridge, it was called. And I lived with them, and I went to an English-speaking university, and I just researched stuff and handed in these papers at the end of 4 months. And I went to Spanish classes at another school. And so that's how I did it. So it wasn't really a formal program. We just kind of pieced it together, and that was my end of my bachelor's degree. And then I stayed on, right, and was just mostly having margaritas and teaching English.
And I presume this is well before like Zoom and everything. So you weren't doing any kind of asynchronous or synchronous classes online. It was
I was completely on
all
my own.
thorough research. Yeah.
Yeah, I was really by
So
myself in a library alone most of
so
the time.
what made you choose Mexico out of all the options that you possibly had?
I'd never been there before, but I had a friend whose family had moved there, and so that's how there was no particular a thought process. It was just that was available, and so I got on the plane and left and did that. Yeah, which was a
And what
big
were
deal.
your
I was from a small city, right? And so when you walk
Yeah,
fly in
Lethbridge? I
at
mean,
night, you know,
Lethbridge is small. So if
yeah,
and then Mexico City for our listeners that may not know, it's the largest city in Mexico, but it might also be like it is one of the largest in the whole Latin America continent, if we group them all in a continent. So from Lethbridge to 25 million people out on the streets, what were your first impressions when you kind of got settled?
when I flew in plane, it was nighttime, and you could just see the lights and the skyline forever and ever and ever. And I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? Like it was amazing, it was exciting, but it was pretty scary. So I went really full on into this huge big city experience. Like I was terrified to ride the metro. like, because you had to go down this long, I didn't even hardly know what a metro was because we have buses where I came from. And we had
Yeah.
to go down this long, staircase into the dark. And I didn't speak the language either at all.
Wow.
So I had to get around, and I went to Spanish one, level one, and did all of that. And so that was, I did it though, I just bumbled around
So,
till I,
what you're
yeah.
talking about sounds like a lot of our international teachers' experiences, just sort of jumping right in, getting on a plane with a couple suitcases and not knowing what to expect. And
hmm
so, can you tell us a little bit about the kind of cultural adjustments that you had to make?
I think that one of the things at the bank, which I found was really long days. Like they take these 2 hour lunches
Mm.
and they get there really early and then they leave stay till 8 at night. And
Wow.
but they seem to be wandering around chatting and having coffee and doing a little work. And I always thought, why can't we just work faster and go home at 5 or 4, right? So that was hard for me, and I didn't know what their work was. So that kind of thing. And I got a homesick too. I sometimes will go to McDonald's and
Oh,
just have
yeah.
a quarter pounder just to feel like at home. So those were some things that were kind of strange for me. But I think just not knowing the language, you feel kind of isolated. And although oddly, people always ask me for directions, so I think I have this thing about me where I always look like I know where I'm going. I look nice. So
I
when I
get that
really,
too. Any
yeah,
country. And I'm like, can you not obviously tell I don't come from here? But no, they stop because they're like, that person knows where she's going.
yeah, yeah. So maybe that's the secret. Just
And
look like you know what you're doing.
I'm always confused when I'm new to a city and someone's asking me for directions. I'm always confused how long I should let them ask before I tell them I have no idea.
Exactly. Maybe they just need somebody to talk to.
At least
Have
we
a
have the
chat with.
sense to say, sorry, I'm not from here, I don't know. But there are times where I've stopped the wrong person on a street and they'll tell me the wrong answer just to get rid of
Yeah,
me. They'll be like,
yeah.
yeah, turn left and
Down
then
there.
go straight a few blocks. And then it's like
hmm
completely the wrong way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, Arlayna, it sounds like you had 3 or 4 career paths that you
hmm
had in front of you. You had sort of this ESL, you had adult education, career coaching. How did that all play out when you're teaching people English at the bank in Mexico City? I believe is what I heard. What was the kind of how did that play itself out where you found your way to career transitions? Can you walk us through that just a little bit?
Well, in Mexico City, not so much, right? I was working at the bank, and that was an interesting experience. And in career coaching, I think sometimes there's people who plan a lot, and they have a very linear path that they stick to. And for me, I go somewhere and I get the skills, and then I just keep moving in the direction that it takes me. So when I came back to Canada, I was working with former Yugoslavian and Central Europeans and that part of the world who were really well educated, but they couldn't do the things that they were doing in Canada anymore. So the I was asked to figure out how to help them transition into other jobs. So I started just reading pop culture books like What Color is Your Parachute? Probably many people
Mm.
have read
Mm-hmm.
Do What You Love and The Money Will Follow. Just whatever I could find. And then I would take them and we would do just all this research in the library and try to figure out what they could do to transfer into Canada to the Canadian markets. And then that was the beginning to of recertification processes. So at the time, really, there weren't many recertification processes for engineers, for example. So a lot of engineers are driving the cab kind of thing. So how do we get back into engineering and going and having them and figuring all the professional associations and what would the path be? So I just kept doing more of that and then taking more and more classes in it, and it just kept burgeoning until I ended up where I am today. So
So, Arlena, it sounds like you kind of specialize in one area of career transitions of people, international people who have come from other countries, perhaps into Canada. Is that kind of a specialty of yours?
yeah, my specialty is internationally trained professionals. I'm trying to recertify in the country and international students. Canada has a huge international student
Per-
population. hmm
How multinational is Canada?
Well, I've heard Toronto is the most cosmopolitan international city in the world, even over in New York or London, because the way the immigration policy works is they pick people from different groups from different countries, so you don't get like huge onslaughts of one group necessarily. So and Calgary too, which traditionally has not been diverse as some place. It's a big oil and gas city. We've brought in over the last 15 years so many oil and gas workers. Venezuela, the Venezuelans had to leave, like really highly trained people to come in and work. India, China, to work in the oil industry too. So, and then we have a doctor crisis here, so we're bringing lots of medical professionals. And now there's a huge push on lawyers, exactly, bringing lawyers into the country. So,
Which is going to be very interesting because law is very local, like very, very different. So they're going to have to catch up on all Canadian law, which will be very different from their home
yeah,
country.
and there's a whole certification process, which means they have to take sets of courses and pass
Mm.
certain tests once they get here. And then once they've done that, then they have to article as
Mm.
well. So there is a period of time. So, and
Mhm.
that's one of the last ones that has been in full recertification because it is a tricky one, and law is very cultural, whereas medical is cultural too, but it's just a little more clear cut, right? The
Yeah, the body is the
sciences,
body anyway.
yeah, wherever you go.
Uh, uh,
And then the international students, I work a lot with them finding jobs, just part-time jobs. They land, they're
Mm.
so confused. Just getting a job at a coffee shop is a really big deal. And most people in the world do CVs or curriculum vitae. They don't do a resume. And so they kind of apply the same process to going to a coffee shop as they would for a professional job. And you have to keep changing all the documents. It's very confusing for people. So I work a lot with that as well.
Hey Ken, I know you want to say something, but I just
yeah,
want
go ahead.
to I want
Yeah.
to talk about this because this is now entering my wheelhouse. Arlena, the CV and the resume, I know that we use that term interchangeably overseas, but can you tell us kind of in Canada or in your circle, what are the differences?
The CV is a detailed chronology of pretty much everything you've ever done. And even some people have, their high school, even if they went like an elementary school, it depending on the situation, all the way up. It can be long. It can be
Wow.
5 pages long. It can be 10 pages long, and they attach transcripts and documents and all these things together. The only people that really do, unless it's specifically required in Canada, doctors do it, professors do it, because you're having
Mm.
long lists of publications and that
Yeah,
kind of
journals
thing.
and stuff.
But a resume is 2 pages
Mm.
and maybe a cover letter. And so you have to adapt it. So if you're going to a coffee shop, and look, I get people who have degrees who are going to a technical college for a quick certificate zap to get into the country, right? And
Mhm.
so they may have a lot of experience, and nobody at Starbucks wants to see your publications, right? And so
Mhm.
they're not getting an easy job. It's not easy. Starbucks is not easy. I just wanted to put that out
Yeah.
there. But so they need to just totally adapt their information to the context, to the setting, and that's tough to do if you've never thought about it before. It's different. It's different.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I was pretty sure CV was like everything, and then our resume is that 2 page. But as I say, overseas we and this is part of what I do as JP Mint Consulting is that I call it as a 2 page CV. So I create a
Yeah,
2 page CV. People give me a 4 page, I make it two. If they give me a 1 page, I make it two. And it's
exactly.
just because that's sort of the standard. Ken, you were going to say something about something else.
Well, I mean, I have a ton of questions. Let's start with this, Arlena. How do you turn this into a career? Do clients pay you directly? Do you work for the government? How do you make a living out of career coaching and international certification licensing?
Well, my day job for the past 15 years has been at a college. So I work for the career services, and that's where I've gotten almost all of my experiences, right? So, for example, I taught a class for a long time, almost 10 years, for engineers. So I did co-facilitated with an engineer, but it was the first step in the recertification process was a law and ethics class. So we prepped them for that, and then they could do their first step of their process that way. So that's how I got into it, was this career services thing, which is actually the college. We work with all different kinds of students, right? Like from all different types of backgrounds, but the majority seem to be coming from these two groups, and has always been my special interest. And then I have a part-time coaching business where then I work with international students in particular before they come into the country. I like to, get all the documents and have them understand what the process is so they can hit the ground running. And then I give them email support afterwards to transition them into the university or college and help them. And I also work a lot with postgrads in my part-time business that way.
Arlayna, I'm from the United States, and JP and yourself are from Canada. What is the demand amongst high school and college, amongst high school students who might be getting international abroad, interested in coming and studying in Canada? What is the trends lately, and which direction is that going up, going down, for students wanting to come and join you in Canada for education and careers?
That's a great question. There's an up and there's a down to that question. So Canada, last year in particular, exceeded their international student goals. They went over the top across the country. So it was so many. There sometimes weren't spots in some classes. There's a housing issue. Then it kind of contributed to driving the rental prices up, and students had nowhere to live, like necessarily anywhere to live in some communities. And so there's pressure on the government to reduce those numbers. So now this year, they've lowered the application numbers back to what I consider normal levels. And that's still good news because in general, Canada still wants them. The schools still want them. The opportunities are still there, and it's a really high level of application success to get into the country, even though I think in the news, if people are paying attention, it seems like, oh, the rates are going down and students aren't coming anymore. No, like too many students are coming anymore. We're back to what is normal, and that's good for everybody. But Canadian universities and colleges are really, have a huge. When I started in the place I work at, it was 6% of our student population was international students, and now it's around 50 some percent.
Wait, 50, 50?
Like half, I would say. Because we've expanded our area, and the colleges and universities are very interested. An international student in Canada pays up to 3 times the tuition that a local student does, you see.
So that number shocked me because I remember, I think I heard like 10% international, they sort of cap it, the universities cap the population at 10% international to allow, the Canadian students that are raised in Canada and going through the high school system and everything, a chance to get in. But if they're doing 50 and 50, is that hurting Canadian students trying to get in, or is that just because they've raised the overall student population?
They've raised the overall student population. It would depend on your school and area of country. So, and that's just my experience, because also the place I worked at expanded. But yeah, it's that's the debate in medical, like training doctors, for example, because they need the money. They want the information exchange. They want the global student as well, and then that money goes into the universities as well. So there's a lot of debate how many students, how many places for students should there be locally. And then because it's a global world, what is happening sometimes is Canadian students can't get into the medical programs, and then they're going to the Caribbean or they're going to Ireland. So they're going over there as an international student when maybe I know one student, her parents were dentists, and she couldn't get into medical school in Alberta, and so she got in Australia, and her parents went to Australia. So we lost 2 dentists, and there's a shortage of medical professionals, and then they went over to Australia. Yeah.
Arlayna, if somebody comes to Canada to study, what are the chances that they're going to stay and practice their profession in Canada? And is that also a challenge when you finish your education? If you get the right to come to school in Canada, do you also get the right to practice your profession there as well?
There's a work visa process. So it's the postgraduate work visa. And as soon as they're getting close to being done, they apply for this next step off of the student visa, and they get a couple of years to get going in their profession. And then if that works out, they can apply for what they call permanent residency. So, and then once they have, which is close to citizenships, like you're permanent.
How many years is permanent residency? I think it was it 4 years? 3. Oh, it's 3 now.
And then you
Okay.
can apply for citizenship.
And so it
And
takes
does
you have
that
to.
include does that include the university time, or
No,
it's post university
it's
3 years?
post-university.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
And it takes what, citizenship to get the passport, or the permanent resident?
Permanent residency. Yeah, so
Yes, to
some
get.
people never get the citizenship. They
Well,
just
we'll stay
Permanent
in the.
residency gives them a passport?
they get documents that allow them
Yeah,
to.
I didn't think they get a
Yes,
passport.
I'm not a passport expert actually.
Okay. No, I'm pretty sure because I'm doing this in reverse in Mexico. So I'm a temporary resident for 4 years. That's why I was thinking 4. So temporary resident for 4 years, then I get permanent residency, and that allows me, like you say, the paperwork to stay here in perpetuum. But if I want a passport, and if I want the right to vote, and if I want citizenship, I would have to write a test and then do a number of things to be able to do that. So I think the same process in Canada. I have international students who have settled in Canada, and from Nigeria, from Algeria, and I'm on Facebook with them, so I'm well aware of what they're doing, and I'm so happy that they've found this path to continue their international lifestyle. They, started with me in Oman, having going to the American school and, fully in English, and then transitioned to Canadian University out east, or I think most of them went to Halifax, Dartmouth, and then now they're all over Canada, and they're just flourishing, enjoying the process of, I think they're going through their permanent residency now in the 3 years, and I'm excited for Canada to have them, but I'm also excited for them to have that lifestyle that they learned about in Oman.
Universities and colleges do offer them a lot of support with looking for work and doing that process. And also, there's lots of free services sponsored by the government throughout the country to help newcomers get into, figure out where to get their professional jobs so that we can bypass, some of the low skilled people get stuck sometimes. I think they don't know there's as much help as there is sometimes, and they hear from their friends that they have to start lower than they do, but they're actually, since I've started, I mean, the services have just increased, really. So Canada really wants newcomers. I mean, it's not a guarantee to apply to get in or anything like that,
Mhm.
but it is maybe more open than some countries in the world. Yeah.
Arlayna, in the United States, this is it has become a very political issue. The student visa, people coming in professionally. In Canada, is there a debate? More students, more foreigners, less foreigners, or is it pretty much agreed that the success of Canada depends on people coming in from other countries to bolster the economy, to fill positions? Is it, you said earlier it was up and down, but is there a consensus, or is that still a year by year, decade by decade thing?
I think people are really positive about it overall. It's pretty. Our workplaces are pretty multicultural, and where I noticed the sensitivity was with this housing issue, which is a really recent development. When it starts to affect everybody, you can't rent a place and the rents double or triple all of a sudden. Like, that's not okay for anybody. And so the question is, I don't think people are like angry at immigrants. They're angry at the policy, and they say reduce the policy, and they did. So we hope to see some movement forward from that. But once rents go up, people, owners and things don't want to pull it back down. So, but that will hopefully. So I would say in general, there hasn't been a huge pushback on immigration. People are pretty positive about it. Yeah.
Well, I know from my friends and family that live in Canada. I mean, speaking for myself, I'm super happy to have international newcomers come into Canada. But not living there, I would get the finger on the pulse from my family and friends, and we're just not having enough babies. Like none of my friends have children. We're not repopulating ourselves. So if we want to continue growing our country, we need somebody to come in and, create families and create jobs and create small businesses. And I, for one, I think it's amazing. I do love the fact that we have this tapestry of cultures. As you mentioned, you walk into any office or restaurant, and it's a multicultural staff, and with that bring their celebrations, that bring their traditions. I think one of the worries, Kent, is, speaking to sort of older generation Canadians, is that they might not be assimilating so much to the Canadian way, which is, as you can guess, very apologetic, very concerned for the other, very careful that we don't offend anyone. This is sort of the Canadian way. And some of the concerns are that with wide open doors, we might get people that don't quite assimilate to that Canadian way. Arlayna, what do you think about what I just said?
I think that's true, and it also depends maybe on there's a Quebec, right? They're trying to preserve their French history and language, and so they've been more there's been more issues in that province than in other English people speaking areas. Seem to be have always kind of just grabbed what's best and tried to make money off of it and keep going. But it is a consideration when you are bringing in people who have very sometimes very different, not even from really different parts of the world, and different. We don't know what that's going to look like, but the information that we sort of teach and work with is creating the new Canadian. That's why the term is like, what will that look like? It's not about living in the past. And and I know what you're saying about older people. So there's think they're seeing the changes more than other people.
Well, because they've had that many more years of being quote unquote Canadian, and now they're seeing it change. But I think what we're seeing in the news, and that's why I don't like watching the news, are the exceptions. We hear about the drowning of a female, a young girl in a hotel swimming pool because of the shame that she brought on her family, and that was an immigrant family. Or we're seeing the gun violence rise in the big cities, but I wouldn't say that this is the norm for every newcomer that comes into Canada. It's going to be those, less than 1% of the people that just don't fit in or assimilate.
Tipping point. I think we're going to move into, we don't know what this, because there are so many people from really opposing cultures. And so we don't know what that will look like. But to date, I haven't seen, and I'm in Calgary's smaller than Toronto and Vancouver and stuff too. So maybe my experience isn't quite like the really huge cities. But it's changing, and there could be pushback there at some point, like we saw with the housing issue. People started to say, why is this really happening? And if other issues start to pop up, it may go that way, but not the norm. I wouldn't say it's the norm now.
All right, let's take a moment for a little commercial about how to get in touch with us. You can, of course, find all four of us at the itpexpat.com. That's www.itpexpat.com.
Or you could also find us at email at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
Or if you're into Facebook, we have a new Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/ITPexpat, where you can find all kinds of inside information about ITP Expat.
You can also find us on Instagram at ITP Expats. That's with an S. ITP Expats is our handle.
All right, and thank you, listeners. We have over 100 countries represented by our listeners, and though we're not monetized, we are here for you, and we would like to thank all of you for listening. So let's get back to the show.
Arlayna, some of our audience are going to be teachers who work with students who have other passports other than a North American, Canadian, U.S. passport. Let's say I'm holding a Moroccan passport or an Egyptian passport or a Saudi Arabian passport, and I want to be a film student. I want to be an artist. I want to study literature. Am I going to have as much success getting into the Canadian system as if I want to study engineering or medicine or physics? Do I still have a chance of getting into the system if I want to study film?
Well, that's the question for all our film studies students too, right? It's a word of mouth competitive business, and you have to get out there and volunteer and get part of, professional associations, and you have to really get involved. And so success, that's a tough question because those fields are highly competitive. I think talent surpasses a lot of things, but they have to really.
Can I even get into Canada if I want to study literature? I hold a Saudi Arabian passport. I went to high school, maybe here at an international school. Do I have a chance of coming to Canada to study literature, or is
Yes.
Canada going to say, we really need doctors?
No, you can apply for anything.
Okay.
I would say culturally, people don't want to do study necessarily. It's not. But my day job, we have a film production studio, and most of the students are from India
Okay.
right now.
That is so. Tell us more about that. Tell us more about where in the world are people coming from these days to come to Canada, and what are they interested in studying? I know it's a broad question, I know, but I'm just curious.
Well, I would say the STEM careers are still highly popular, science,
Yeah.
technology, engineering, about anything related, data analytics, and that kind of thing. But architectural design is one, if we're looking more at the artistic side. Social work is popular. Nursing. Everybody wants to be like, well, a lot of women want to be nurses, and because that's a really it's more of a caregiving thing, but you can use it anywhere in the world, so that's a popular one. But the majority are coming in for the science and technology medical careers, and that's a cultural, I think, expectation of families in most places in the world. So we were getting a lot of artists out of Iran for a while. I'm like, wow, this is another art. And the people who had really high level art careers, and I'm like, wow. And so they seem to be very social. They get involved in the art community. I had one lady, she just did an exhibit at one of our big centers, and I mean they're incredibly talented people and very social, which is a big deal. You have to get out and just join things and meet people no matter what career you're in, and that's building your own rebuild. I always tell the students, not who you know but who you get to know. You can rebuild your life and you can rebuild those networks. So yeah, it's really science, but yeah, they do other things too, and they can, yeah, if they want to, because there are probably fewer international students in those programs, to be honest. So
Sorry, Arlene, let me follow up a question. Sorry, JP. I know I'm just throwing
No,
darts here.
this is very interesting.
Arlena, how often, if it's like you said, there are families around the world who highly value careers in science and medicine. How often do you meet the students who have come to Canada to study science and medicine, who come up to you and say, you know what, that's really my family's dream, but I was kind of interested in something. Do you get much of that? You're kind of their counselor, you're kind of their administrator. How often does that happen to you?
one of the nurses a lot do two things. They'll do the first thing to make their parents happy, and then they'll be back after for a second degree or a second
Okay.
certificate in something that they've discovered along the way. Or I had a girl, she did business and psychology double major because she wanted to make parents happy with business and they didn't want her to be a psychologist. So when she was able to move forward on her own, then I'm sure she became a psychologist down. I mean, I had another girl, I forget where she was from, but she wanted to be a poet. And so we talked about it, and I said, well, most people who do writing, they study English. So I had two boys who wanted to be nurses,
Yep.
and that's a female position, and they were really upset because their parents, that was not okay. And so I'm not a full counselor. We actually, I referred them to counseling
Mm-hmm.
and to deal with their family issues. But they couldn't be they really didn't have the grades to be doctors either. So,
Yep.
but they knew they wanted to be a nurse. So yeah, there's different kinds of challenges that definitely come up culturally, for sure. Women don't want to go, and the other thing is sometimes women don't want to be computer programmers, or like they'll have math and science, and they don't want to go into some of those engineering kind of things. And I see a lot of gender kind of ish things, stereotypes maybe that
That's
people are
still
drawn to.
happening in 2024.
They
That's
don't want
crazy
to
because
do
that was
it.
happening back in 90s when I was going through university. I had one friend, very talented scientist who went through for engineering at our top school for engineering, Waterloo. And she told me she was one of, I don't know, maybe like a handful of girls in her program, and everybody else were guys.
Still like that. Yeah, definitely.
Jeez.
Yeah, don't want to do it. And
So
there's
all the more
scholarships
reason
for women. There's a lot of scholarships for women.
we need to recruit women for sure for those positions.
Yeah, yeah.
So what about the adjustment, that the transition they need to make when they come into this new country of the, like, have they done research? Have they come on a trip previously? Are you finding, how are their transitions once they get landed?
Well, for people in school, I think the school just takes care of them, right? And they make friends, and although they tend to stick with their community, and so we try to encourage them to join other kind of things to get outside of that comfort zone. So I think but I had one girl, she was from a country in Africa, and her dad, the visa came through, and her dad told her she didn't even know he'd applied. Said in 2 weeks you pack your bags. Here's your airplane tickets. You're going to Calgary. She didn't even know where it was, and then she just landed. And so I don't. She was a business student. She did okay, but
I mean, the
you
biggest
know,
thing for them is winter wear, right? But at least they're
yeah,
landing in
winter.
August when it's a
Yeah,
nice
their
when it's a
biggest
nice
fear.
month.
You're right. The biggest fear is, will I get through winter?
Yeah.
And this is just really cold and horrible and
Hmm.
terrifying. But and they do. They get a Canada Goose coat. That's always a big.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if you're familiar with.
Yeah, those are like super
Super
expensive.
expensive. That's the big thing. If you get a goose coat, then you're going to be warm. But
When I was
so
in
and then
university, I had I joined, even as a French major. I joined the business. It was ASEC,
yeah,
Association Internationale d'Économie, or something like that, because I was at a business school, a business university, and that was kind of like the thing to join. So I joined, and I met an international student from Ghana, Joe from Ghana, and I learned that Joe had no friends. Joe had no sort of like, he had joined this group to make some friends.
right.
And when I went over to his basement room that he had rented out, it was just very sad. So I started giving him some posters and, sort of Canadian up his dorm room, because it was just very sad. I gave him my highly precious world map that I'd had since I was a kid, where I was writing in all the capitals as I learned them, just to give him something from home. He could sort of center in on Ghana there. But I was thinking, yeah, back then there weren't a lot of people like yourself, helping international students figure out how to access the services. How is it different now in 2024 for international newcomers to universities?
I think that most schools have an international department now. And
Ah,
there's international advisors, and then, they get them together. There's, the new student orientations can be directly separate events for international students, so they get them moving pretty quickly that way, which I don't think existed. Didn't always exist, right? When I was in university, I think there wasn't even a career services, I don't think, or anything like that. There was a counselor, where it was just
yeah.
school. There wasn't much, right? You
There was
just
a health
sang or
clinic that might have had a psychologist, maybe, but
maybe.
yeah, there was. I don't remember any kind of international department that was helping these new students sort of assimilate or get used to, the Canadian schools
Yeah.
system, and how to use a cafeteria card and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I think there is a lot more support now for the international, but the newcomers, though, they can be pretty lonely. I think unless they get involved with, again, with their church or their own communities, right away. There are more services again that hopefully they would get connected with in the community. But I think they say for an immigrant, it takes 3 years to make a full transition. Like, and
Wow.
maybe in life, that's a tradition. Any kind of big transition is about three years. So they really have to, stick through it because they're struggling. They've sold everything. They've trying to get a job. They're trying to figure this out. Whereas this international students it has a lot more support. The pandemic wasn't great because we had international for anybody, but they
Mm.
landed and they literally were doing classes in their apartments alone and literally hadn't seen anyone for almost a year. And so when we started opening up appointments, they're like, I don't know anyone and I've been here for a year and alone.
Mm.
And so that was obviously for everyone horrible, but that was so they do land alone and but the schools are much more supportive, I think now. Yeah.
Arlayna, you might have answered this earlier, and you're talking about how Toronto might be one of the most cultural cities in the world. What are some of the positives that you see with this trend continuing in Canada? What are some of the great things that will happen to Canada as it welcomes more and more people from around the world, in your opinion?
Just restaurants have said like,
All
yeah,
of a
if you
sudden,
live
you
in
can find
Calgary,
great
you're
food, right?
grateful. Calgary, I don't know. We're like a Western town. I don't know. So it's it just yeah, the culture
I've always
and
thought of Calgary as kind of the Texas of Canada.
it is. It's like Dallas,
Yeah.
Texas.
If it moves, it's on a plate.
That's exactly it. So we are grateful for that part,
Yeah.
and but bringing global business ideas in, and just the desire to work and be successful and just push everything forward, I think, um, is going to really change the
It's
landscape.
like bringing the world to Canada. I
Yeah,
mean, I think a lot of Canadians feel like, we don't really need to travel. We can go to the Ethiopian restaurant, go down and
yeah,
have a chat with our Iranian friends at the coffee shop, and
yeah,
so it's like, why go travel? We can just stay at home.
yeah, yeah. I think it's very, very positive overall. It's and even like I had a student the other day. There's like we have something called the Handy Bus, that is a bus system that brings people with disabilities around town for their appointments and stuff. He was outside. He was from Korea taking pictures of the handy bus. Then why are you taking pictures of the handy bus? He said, "Well, we don't have that in Korea, and I'm looking for business ideas, right?" And so he's
Oh.
thought he
Okay.
would go home. I mean, I guess that's good for Korea, but he was looking for ideas and vice versa when we send our students out abroad. I work with those two. I've worked with internships students going abroad. I worked with a program where they went for 4 month internships after graduation throughout the world. They're getting their ideas and bringing them home as well, too. So,
I've often thought of how I could use my travels and my living in other countries and bringing those ideas to Canada, but they never came to fruition. I still think if anybody that's visited Germany and has lived there in a house with those shutters on the outside of the window, I think that would be brilliant in Canada, to just be able to lower and it's like nighttime, absolute nighttime, even during the day. And I think they're brilliant, but no one's ever thought of bringing them. Maybe just snow wouldn't work. I don't know. But I had all these ideas. I was one of those people that was like, I could import all these things, but then, yeah, how do you do it? How do you go through all the licensing and
well,
that?
there's services for that here too. So,
Well, maybe that's going to be my third career then. I'm going to have all these ideas. Kent, we're getting close to the end, and I know we usually have two questions. I think it would still be interesting to see if Arlayna has
You know
some
what?
answers
I'm
to
going
those
to
two
tell you, of
questions.
course, we're going to ask the question, but I'm going to guess, having known Arlayna now for almost an hour, I'm going to guess she has not had any run ins with the law that she's able to talk about in public.
that's not a question. No, I have a sort of run in.
Oh yeah, there we go. All right,
Okay.
police
For our
story.
listeners,
Share
the
Arlena's
question
stories,
is
so.
for the listeners, we would like to know about Arlayna's run in with the authorities abroad or in Canada. Arlayna, what do you think?
Okay, so I was trying to leave the country of my last moment. I was at the airport and I was going through customs to go home for the last time. And the Mexican border person said, "You can't go." And she's going through my things, and she says, "You have seeds in your suitcase." And I'm like, "So on earth?" "Yes, semillas in Spanish."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "No, I don't." And she's like, "Yes, yes, you do, and you can't go." And I go, "Okay, well, I'll go back to my address and my family here." And she says, "You can't leave." And I'm like, "But you can't go. And then you can't leave." And I'm standing there just about in tears. And I'm like, after 2 years, I didn't know what was going on. And finally, I thought, "Oh, do you think I could go to the ATM for a minute?" And she's like, "Oh, you can do that." And so I went and took my last 1,000 pesos, all the money I had in the world, out of the ATM and gave it to the Samia finding border crossing guard. And she went, "Ha ha ha ha." Then she let me go through. That was my run-in
Wow.
with the law, and I was just trying to get home for the
Was
last time, but
was there?
So
There
you
was
didn't
no
have
seeds.
anything.
You didn't have anything, did you?
no.
Wow.
Just like,
Uh,
"Here," and I'm like, "No, there's nothing there." There was nothing there.
but was that the first time you had to run to the ATM to make something in your life easier?
Yeah, I've heard all the stories. I know in my Spanish class, I don't know because I had a great family too. They coached me on where to walk and where how to dress, and so maybe that helped. But I was one of the only people in my Spanish class that hadn't had something stolen, or two people I know had been on bus robberies. At the time, that was a big
Ugh.
deal. I don't know what it's like in Mexico now. It's been a long time since I've been there. They'd all had something done, and I just maybe just because they worked with me, I didn't quite look as touristy. Maybe so. I was very, very lucky that way. I had a positive experience. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. I
Yeah.
don't know that I would have figured that out. I think I would have just been like, no, let's unpack my entire
Let's
suitcase.
look
I
for
will
some of
assure
those
you, I
seeds.
do not have seeds.
And then you might still be standing there now,
I
JP.
might
Mintz.
still be there.
Stay, but you can't go.
Oh my
You can't
gosh.
go forward. You can't go backwards.
This is
JP,
it.
what was our other question for our
Well,
lovely
I want
guest?
to reverse this question. I want to ask Arlayna, as the expert of newcomers and people coming into Canada, can you tell us three things that they bring into Canada? Like, have you seen sort of a pattern of three things they feel that they need to take from home to feel at home in Canada? It kind of threw you for a loop because you were
Oh, this
expecting
other
the
one
other
was
one.
much easier. The
Yeah.
running
No,
was
but
easy.
I was just wondering, like, do you see a pattern of, oh, like they all want to bring spices from home or,
I don't, like I'm sure they bring food. They all have cultural dress because we have different days where we do that. And actually, it's been more and more relaxed. Some people, once they start school, people are wearing their home clothing now, and our staff is as well. So that's been a huge shift,
oh,
where you
nice.
don't have to wear like your traditional business casual stuff anymore. Um, I don't know what they bring. I've never asked. I'll have to ask them that. What was in your
Okay.
suitcase?
Yeah, check to make sure they don't have any seeds, Arlena.
I
You got to
guess.
turn this around.
Going,
Arlena, do you have any social media, any way that people who might be interested in your consulting business, anything that they could find you, anywhere they can find you?
site called arlaynaalcock.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. And right now I'm doing what's called the Tiny Challenge. So it's free, and what I like to do is take a concept or something you're working on, and for 5 days straight we work on it either by email and phone and video call, and we try to make progress in that area and see if you find that helpful. I also like to have chats with people, and even if they don't want my service, just to see what's going on, and it's good for me to find out what's maybe I can ask them what's in their suitcase
Yeah.
and
What do you bring into Canada?
I
to
love
Canada. Like I like to have a chat and maybe connect them with their university or college services, and that would be just something I would like to do to support people and get started. But yeah, so look forward to chatting with
So
anyone.
families of potential university students overseas, some of our listeners are parents, of international students. So they could reach out to you and kind of get a lowdown on how to apply and where to apply and that sort of thing. And if you don't know the answers, you would probably know
Like
somebody
just to
that,
help them
yeah.
guide them in that process. And I really, because I am a career coach, which evolved from sort of that all that integration support work. I really would love to work people on getting their resumes and cover letters and teaching them how to do a bit of an interview and labor market. I can do career assessments, labor market information if people are trying to pick a program. that will make them successful in Canada and maybe in their home country too. I can do all those kinds of things with people. So I really like to set people up more for success before they leave the country, if at all. And even recertification process. I have a broad knowledge of that. If you're a lawyer, a doctor, or another type of professional trades, Canada needs tradespeople as well. We can guide you into the recertification processes. That type of thing would be a great situation. But obviously, once people land, if they have questions, you get stuck on something, that's great. And then the post-grads. You graduate, you cross the stage, get your certificate, shake the president's hand. Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do now. I need a job. How do I get started getting a job related to my visa requirements? So it's not necessarily with local kids. It's like, what's my dream job? How can I start my career? But with newcomers, it's how can I get that job that will meet my visa requirement and get me through this process. We'll worry about the dream job later.
Yeah, well, once we get our PR, our permanent residency, yeah.
Yeah.
Arlayna, do you want to plug your university one more time for the ITP crowd?
It is Bow Valley College.
Bow Valley College. Fantastic. So if you're lucky to be a student there, you might get to visit Arlayna up in her office, right?
I'd be happy to have you and happy to help you. And
JP Mint, let's do a round of final comments. We'll start with you, JP, and then we'll move to you, Arlayna. JP, final thoughts?
Yeah, I've been very happily surprised with this interview. I wasn't sure the expertise where we were going to be able to sort of bridge from our audience, but I think a lot of our audience will have gotten some very interesting facts and stories, and I want to thank you very much for your time this morning.
Arlayna, do you want to give us some final parting thoughts?
You guys have tough questions. I really enjoyed this, and I really appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to speaking to anyone about their career that's interested in coming into North Canada or the United States. I'd be really excited to chat with them. Thank you so much.
Arlayna Alcock on LinkedIn.
I was going to say, yes, please check out Arlayna. Yeah, as you can tell, she's really easy to talk to. JP Mint, right? I mean, you're just a great conversationalist, and I really think that your students and the people that you work with are really lucky to have you out there helping them out. So once again, I want to thank JP Mint. You can find her at jpmintconsulting.com. Thank you so much, JP Mint.
Thank you.
I would also like to give a quick plug to Greg Lemoyne, who's not here tonight with us, but you can find his book, whatever it's called. I forget now. I haven't looked at my copy in months, at www.amazon.com or wherever you buy your finer books. I'd also like to thank our special guest, Arlayna Alcock. You can find her at www.arlaynaalcock.com. That's ARLAYNAALCOCK.com. Check out her services for professional recertification, for recertification, certification, assimilation, all of her career coaching. Check out her website. And once again, I'm Kent the Cat Guy, and you can find me this year in room 303. We'll see you all next time.